Welcome to the Dormroom Audiophile, the world's worst YouTube CD collection series. Something pretty phenomenal for the channel happened recently. It was my birthday, and in celebration of my birthday, I decided to go down my list of albums that I was looking for and pick up a good handful, which I'm going to talk about here. Because this is more albums than I normally buy in one sitting, a lot of my discussions may be a bit on the more scant side with regards to some of the albums. I won't have as much to say, or I won't go on as long as I normally would, but maybe I'll do individual videos for some of these, because these are some of my favorite albums, and I'm very excited to dig into them. Let's start with this box set here. Billie Holiday, the complete Decca recordings. This is what I thought was a long box, but is actually like a book, and it has an entire book-sized booklet in it, and the two discs. Full transparency, I love Billie Holiday. I think she's one of the best of her craft. I think her recordings on Verve Records are some of the best vocal jazz of all time. I'm not that huge on the Decca stuff. I've listened to some of it, and it's kind of not my favorite era of hers, but this was really cheap, and it just recently dawned on me that I had no Billie Holiday in my personal collection, so I decided to change that. Let's see. We got Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan. Little blonde on blonde action. I'm going through a Dylan phase, I guess. I tried to get into him in high school, and I found it really obnoxious, and I found the talk around him obnoxious. You know, the idea that he was some sort of genius that I just wasn't smart enough to get. That kind of soured it. But once I started to really dig into some of this, you know, kind of through conversations with friends, through reading about some of his albums, I really started to appreciate Bob Dylan as a performer and as a songwriter. And Blonde on Blonde is an album that I have wanted physically for a while, not necessarily because it is my favorite Bob Dylan album, but because I feel like having it physically will make it a bit more digestible, maybe. Because this is like a double album with 12-minute long songs on it that are really absurd and kind of esoteric and hard to understand. So having it physically might help me piece it together a bit easier. Okay. Oh, here we go. Let's do a stack of all of one musician here. We've got I don't know what order to show these off in. I'll start here, I guess. Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. These next three albums are Marvin Gaye, and I've been going through a big Marvin Gaye period. There's something about his, the way he sings and the way that the Motown production was sort of recorded and mixed and mastered that sounds really fucking good on my nice headphones, and something about his voice that really kind of cuts through a lot of the humdrum misery of, you know, the outside world. So Let's Get It On is here. I've got What's Going On, Let's Get It On, and What's Going On in the snazzy little slipcase. I haven't dug into the actual disc. I don't know. It appears there's a booklet, which is cool. Obviously, it's like one of the best albums ever, right? But I kind of have been listening to it a lot because it's kind of like, despite it being in reaction to the turmoil of the time and the turmoil that Marvin Gaye was feeling, it's kind of an upper record. Like, it gets you feeling better, which is not something I can say for Here My Dear, which I also got. I recently listened to this album in full, and it was absolutely just bizarre. Like, it's unlike any album I've ever heard. It is very ugly and raw and real, but it's also still so poppy and polished sounding. It's kind of like you're listening to these Motown standards, you know, the beautiful, lush pop music production. You're listening to that sort of thing decay, and it's really compelling. This is just a stack of randoms. Here's here's Meet the Residents. It looks like Meet the Beatles, but it sounds the opposite end of that. I got into the Residents in high school. I found this album cover online, and I thought it was really funny, and I had no idea what it was going to sound like. And then the first time I listened to it, which would have been years ago now, I was just completely blown away. Like, this is still kind of hard to piece together, but you gotta think when this was made, right? This is not something that was whipped up by a bunch of weirdos on BandLab in 20 minutes. This was made with master tapes and studio wizard fuckery. If you've not heard it, it's sort of this weird, bizarre mixture of like musique concrète and like pop music. There are absurd hooks based around like really gross sounding sentences, like infant tango, breath and length, smelly tongues. There's a cover of Boots by Lee Hazelwood, Nancy Sinatra. The Boots Are Made for Walking, and it's the first song, and it's kind of hideous. I love this album. I've already listened to it twice, and the package got here today. Julie London is her name, volumes 1 and 2. Julie London is her name. The volume 1 is the better of the two, and I think that's kind of indisputable. That one's a stone cold classic. You know, Cry Me a River, I'm in the Mood for Love, Say It Isn't So. Something about the guitar and bass as the accompaniment is very raw and interesting, and it really like beats some of the more easy listening stuff that she was doing after that. You know, after that record made a bunch of money. Bill Withers live at Carnegie Hall. This is a new one for me. I don't know too terribly much about Bill Withers, except that he, you know, Ain't No Sunshine's the big song, and Lean On Me's a pretty big song that a lot of people know. But I listened to this version of Ain't No Sunshine, and I was just captivated. Like, you can really hear the room. You can hear this funky bass. I think his voice sounds great. This was a great find. Let's see. This is bizarre. This is a Nirvana bootleg interview CD. I don't know what this is gonna sound like, or if it's an interview that like I've listened to before. Because when I was in high school, you know, you sit around and you listen to Kurt Cobain interviews and you sigh wistfully. That's what it is to be in 11th grade. Led Zeppelin 4, one of the 2 or maybe 3 Led Zeppelin albums that I enjoy listening to. They've never been for me. I respect what they did. I respect the way they kind of pushed rock music forward, but I kind of, you know, it's a respect thing, and it's not a love thing for me. But I love this album. I love Going to California, When the Levee Breaks, you know, Stairway to Heaven's obviously the big song. This is one of the best-selling albums of all time, probably just because of Stairway to Heaven, you know. Now we get into the nonsense, and by the nonsense I mean the obligatory John Coltrane stack. If you watched the last CD Hall video, you'll know there was a Coltrane stack, and this one's no different. Let's speed run. We've got Duke Ellington and John Coltrane. I have tried to get into more Duke Ellington recently, and this is a great album to do that with because it is so goddamn good. Lush Life. I'm surprised I didn't have this one. I think the reason I didn't have this one is because there's a copy of it at my local library, so I had listened to that to death, and I didn't feel the need to have my own copy. But now that I'm really digging into Coltrane, you know, I decided to remedy that. We've got Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane. Thelonious Monk slowly becoming one of my favorites. I got Monk's music in the last episode of the CD Halls, and I loved it, and I've worn it out, and I'm sure I'm going to wear this out too. We've got Coltrane. This is an early album with the John Coltrane band, the big famous band, Elvin Jones, Jimmy Garrison, McCoy Tyner. I think this is their first. I could be wrong, but this is not one that I'm terribly familiar with yet, but I'm sure I'm going to love it. And then we have one that I am terribly familiar with, New Thing at Newport with Archie Shepp. This is one of those albums that I based the hall around because I've been looking for it for a while. The 15-minute cover of My Favorite Things that's noisy and distorted and evil sounding is among my favorite Coltrane recordings. Let's do some blues. We got some blues in the stack. The Real Folk Blues, Volumes 1 and 2. I guess it's The Real Folk Blues and More Folk Blues. I don't know too much about Muddy Waters. I've heard Electric Mud. I liked that album a whole lot. But I feel like this is a pretty solid place to start. These compilations are pretty beloved. These next two are albums I already have, and I'm going to give them to a good friend of mine. These are the first two Howling Wolf albums. Howling Wolf, genius bluesman, one of my favorite voices in all of blues, all of music, honestly. You listen to Captain Beefheart, and you can really hear the Howling Wolf in Captain Beefheart. This is just great song after great song. These are two perfect albums. And, this is another perfect album, in my opinion. The Quintet, Jazz at Massey Hall. I'm giving this to my friend because this is among my favorite jazz recordings of all time. Not a controversial opinion, I know. This is a pretty beloved session with a bunch of pretty beloved musicians. But there's something about the energy here on this album that is so lightning in a bottle, and it's so impressive that it was caught. Okay, we've got two normal ones, and then the last two are a little out there, so bear with me on that. Tenor Madness and Saxophone Colossus by Sonny Rollins. I remember that I was in my bed listening to music when I got the news that Sonny Rollins died, and I had a lot of feelings about that. But I guess what I'll say now that I'm holding these two albums is that it is so remarkable to me that Sonny Rollins lived as long as he did, releasing as much good music as he did, and being in so many good bands as he was. It's really a testament to just his strength as a performer and as a band leader and as a sideman that there are so many phenomenal albums with his name on it that are worth digging into. There's a stretch from 1955's Work Time to one of these. I don't know. I think it might be this one that caps the stretch off of 4 albums that are all phenomenal. And I'm happy to have 2 of those 4 albums in my collection now. So if you've read the title of this video, you're probably thinking, when's the Yoko Ono part gonna come up? And it's right here. It's right here. I know a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about Yoko Ono, and I want to state before I gush over these albums that I'm going to make no excuses for her as a person, right? Because I wasn't there. I don't know whether or not she broke up the Beatles. I have a sneaking suspicion that if anything broke up the Beatles, it was probably heroin. But, it's always possible that this frail woman came into the Beatles studio and broke it up by standing in the corner, Now that we've gotten that out of the way, these are 2 albums that I've really been enjoying recently. More so, approximately Infinite Universe, which is a singer-songwriter sort of album. I think if you're curious about Yoko Ono, or you're Yoko Ono agnostic and you want to test the waters, this is a great album to go for, because I think the image of her as someone who squeals and makes this crazy nightmarish music, that's what you're going to find here. But this album is pretty reserved, and it's very lyrically driven. It's kind of poetic at points. There are some songs on here that really make me emotional. The closing song is phenomenal to me. It's one of my favorites. Looking over from my hotel window. I love this album. What I don't love is this dual disc fucking packaging that is nonsense, and it makes me feel like I'm gonna break the case. This is like a digipack, and I think I'd honestly take it because it kind of makes it feel like it's like a gatefold, even if it's kind of also gentle. I don't know. Oh yeah, and I guess if we're showing off music, I got a Judas Priest cassette tape. Uh, you know, it's got Breaking the Law on it. It was $5 at a flea market, and I was like, sure, let's do it. That's what I got for this episode of the CD hauls. What CDs have you bought, dear viewer? If you've bought any, are you still watching?